Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Blue Sunday here on In the Blue Corner channel. And we just apologise for a slightly late start. We've had Steve Khatib having a few issues trying to join us on the show tonight. But thankfully, so that we've at least got a couple of ugly heads on the screen, we've got the one and only Joe Lutzer back in business and back joining us tonight as our special guest. And, of course, Joe, you've had a little bit of a setback with COVID over there apparently, but you're here to join us for the duration of the show tonight. It's great to see you, mate.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I've caught the dreaded lurgy. I don't know where I got it, but I don't know.
Apparently this thing's a wildly infectious virus and a deadly silent killer, according to our Premier here in Victoria, but you don't look too bad.
Well, maybe I've got one foot in the grave and I don't know. But look, to be honest, it's just like having a really bad cold, Vince. I've got a really sore throat, just pains in the joint. But anyway, I think we're all going to
like the flu used to sound like when we had it a few years ago before this thing called COVID hit. Isn't it
COVID?
Funny?
What's that?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. No one wants to hear
let's
about
not
my
get
issue.
political about COVID, and let's not, I guess, focus our attention on that too much. But it's good to have you back with us after so many weeks away. Obviously busy with your work over there in Bangkok in Thailand, but great to have you back with us, mate. Of course,
no problem.
Steve
and I think I can see Steve trying to get in. I don't know what problems he's got with his internet or his camera, but here he is, I think. He knows how to add himself to the show.
Let's hope he can get back. Oh, we've got him. Welcome, even though it's a belated welcome, Steve Khatib. Nice to see you, mate.
Thank you. This is the beauty of modern broadcasting, isn't it?
A bad tradesman always blames his tools, Steve.
Well, it's great to have all three heads here on the screen. Joe, you might want to sit back a little bit from yours because you're almost taking up the entire box with yours. That's a little better, and hopefully we're not too far different between one and the other. So it's been another big week in sport, and I guess another big week in the Carlton Football Club for various different reasons. Finally, the AFLW teams had a big victory yesterday over St Kilda. That was, I guess, to some extent, a win was expected. Maybe not in such a dominant fashion, but it was good for the girls to turn their form around yesterday. And, of course, we've got some more news coming out of the club, and we've got the annual general meeting taking place in a couple of days from now, and we will focus a lot of our attention on that tonight. Including, I guess, a detailed assessment from both Steve and I on some of the questions that we believe ought to be asked at that annual general meeting. And I know Steve's been busy at work on the financials, and hopefully he can shed some light on what position we're in as a club. And maybe, Joe, you can even throw in your two bobs worth as to what you think of the state of affairs at Carlton. But we'll also quickly cover some of the other major sports going on around the world right at the end of the program. But, of course, this is all about our viewers, and we encourage your involvement in our show. If you'd like to ask a question or leave us a comment or express an opinion, by all means do so by joining us on our YouTube channel, where you can do that in the blue corner and look up Blue Sunday, and you should be able to get us live right now. Otherwise, you can join us on our Facebook page, In the Blue Corner. So there's a couple of ways you can be part of the program. So, Stephen, let's talk Carlton first, shall we? Let's get straight into it. I guess... we're not going to really talk about the AFL women's game too much. I think there was a pretty comprehensive victory there by the girls yesterday.
Have they turned the corner?
Turn the corner. I'd say they've beaten one of the sides that is clearly not up to even our standard, and that's why they're on the bottom of the ladder and lost 6 consecutive games. they have been a lot more competitive than they were yesterday in recent weeks. But it was a welcome return to form yesterday by our girls. I thought it was pretty comprehensive, 48 to 0. To 2, wasn't it? 2 points, both in the first quarter, and then 3 scoreless quarters after that by St Kilda.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. Does it show how poor St Kilda are, obviously, as a newer side into the competition, or does it show Carlton as sort of flat track bullies at home?
I did tell you last week
both.
that our 5 losses were against sides that were in the top 6, and that if we started playing sides that were more middle of the road to bottom of the road, we would probably start winning a few games, which we did yesterday.
Yeah, I suppose it's not just about winning games. It's what signs does it show for the future? What signs does it say about the football program in general? I think when we're tested against those top sides, it didn't say a lot about the football program in general. And in this environment yesterday, where there was an easy kill and we got on top of St Kilda relatively easily, there was a bit of downhill skiing. You know what I mean? And that can happen, but it's all about.
Do you think that sort of performance papers over some of the cracks that are maybe still there within the team and within our women's program?
Absolutely. I think it's not a crack; it's multiple cracks. I think it's at all levels. Sure, the coach needs to be under scrutiny, and there's been knives that have been sharpened. Pardon the pun, to sort of look at his performance, but it's not just that; it's the whole program in itself, and the retention of players. And we spoke about this ad nauseum regarding all of their issues. There's many cracks, and definitely, they reviewed the football department from an AFL men's perspective last year. If you're going to do that, you bring those same consultants in. Those consultants love a billable hour, don't they? And you get them on the women's program as well, because I think the issues are with the women's program as much as the men's, albeit obviously with a COVID year last year that they weren't really focused on as much.
Joe, did you happen to see the game?
It wasn't on here, but seeing as I'm at home in isolation, I watched a fair few of the games, and I'm going to get shot. I think that they've expanded the competition too quickly. Can I just have a look at some of the skills? And
You're allowed to say that, Joe.
Well,
yes, he is.
If you
Why can't you say that? Of course you can. Of course you can say that.
I have a look at some of the skills, and it's just, and I don't want to. It's not about the women. It's about. I think that you've got players not up to it who are actually getting games, and I think this even happened in the AFL when they brought in, the Gold Coast Suns and the 17th and 18th teams. You're spreading the talent pool really thin, and you're getting some of these guys who are not that they're bad players, but they're just not AFL quality players. And it's going to take a while for that competition to really kick off, which we all knew, because women playing the game is only a relatively new concept. But it's not a good spectacle to watch. I watched the game. The game I watched today, the team at halftime are 2 points. I've seen more goals in a game at Melbourne Victory, right? So, but I don't have the answer. People are going, "Oh, do you make the ground smaller?" Well, how does that help? Do you make 16
Well,
players?
it increases the chances for scoring. That's why. But I'll give you.
Yeah, but I don't think it does. I don't think it does, Vince. I think it's the skill level, and it's going to take ages for them to build up that skill. I'll be honest. I looked at them today. Only about 3 of them looked fit, really fit. There was one young girl at Collingwood who was lightning quick, right? And no one could catch her. And I'm like, okay, I know. I gather she's quick.
Joe, I'll give an excuse here, and I think it's not an excuse; it's a reason. They are not fully professional at the moment, right? Now, we can't, as an industry, afford to have them as fully professional. No, it doesn't. The economics don't add up. So
exactly
until they are fully professional, and it's a what you're expecting out of them is pretty much what you're getting right now. Organic growth will occur as you have generations go through, but then they're paid a quarter of the average person's salary, or maybe half at the most, right? If you're lucky, to run around and train, play part time. Some of them, they've had some great stories on some of them. They're working in factories or working in schools, from 8 or 6 in the morning, knocking off at 2 o'clock, having a sleep, and then going to training. I mean, Vince, that's back to the 80s, isn't it, for us?
Yeah. Well, that's what it was like in the men's in the men's league, I suppose you'd call it. Back in the days of when Carlton used to be a dominant, respected football club. We had players that still had day jobs, and they used to train twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and turn up on a Saturday and play a game of football.
Occupation, teacher. Occupation, sales rep.
Yeah, a lot of them had jobs as teachers. I think Richard Pratt used to employ about 3/4 of the Carlton team back in the late 70s and early 80s.
Then he employed
Vizzy. What's that?
Sticks was a stockbroker, wasn't he?
He started as a chalky. Yeah,
he might have started as a stockbroker. Yes.
Yeah. And then he went and worked on the floor. When they were
Look, in the old days. Let's not get into all that. The point is that the men did have other jobs aside from playing football. So really, we're starting off with the women in that same vein.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you, gentlemen, it's only going to get worse because next year there's another 4 clubs to join the 14 that we've got now, and the talent pool's going to be stretched even thinner. So,
but this is my point.
Don't expect it to get better before it gets a bit worse initially.
Well, this is my point. They're trying to make it too fast. I understand why, right? Because all the female supporters who follow these teams that are in, I think one of them's Sydney. Let's take Sydney, okay? So all the female supporters who follow the Sydney Swans want to follow the Swanettes or whatever they are. But I just think we're going way too quick. But
their argument would be, Joe, their argument would be we need to expand, because if we don't expand, we don't have enough opportunity to improve. So it's a catch-22 there, isn't it?
No, I get it. I'm taking one viewpoint. I'm not paid the $1.5 million that Gil McLaughlin is to run the game. I mean, if I was,
try 2.5. Try 2.5.
Well, I'd do it for 1.5. Okay. If the AFL want to save $1 million, I'm available for 1.5.
No, they're not interested in saving money. Look,
well, then I'll do it for 3. But still, but that's my viewpoint. But a win's a win.
What's that?
A win's a win, huh? You got to take the wins when they come. It was a welcome
victory yesterday, and I think that we're a strong chance to be at least competitive against GWS and Gold Coast in the next 2 rounds. The big test will come in the last round when we play Melbourne. And, if Daniel Harford can get that scalp and finish off with 4 consecutive victories, then we finish on 5-5. We probably still don't make finals, but it'll give him a fighting chance to make a case for why he should be reappointed. But it's a matter of whether Carlton sees 5-5 as being acceptable and not making finals as being acceptable. I can't see us making the finals, even if we get to 5 wins and 5 losses, because our percentage is so poor. And we're also losing games against those top 6 sides. So the chances of beating Melbourne in that last round are fairly remote. And, they'd probably have to have a fairly injured team to give us a realistic chance of beating them. So I think realistically the best we can hope for the women this year is 4 wins and 6 losses. And that's it, assuming we beat GWS and Gold Coast, which we might still even drop one or both of those games. You never know. But I think that's realistically where I can see our women finishing at about 4 wins, 6 losses, and somewhere around, 9th or 10th on the ladder. What do you think, Steve?
But I've got to add...
Oh, sorry, Joe.
No, I was just going to say before I cut to Steve, But in true Carlton style, I see all the supporters have all got the knives out and want Daniel Harford sacked immediately.
Yeah.
Bring in Simo. That's the way.
There's a lot of people on social media, channels and YouTube shows all calling for Daniel Harford to be, basically given the guillotine in the middle of Prince's Park. I think that's
very simplistic.
Grossly,
that's a very simplistic view. Very simplistic, shallow view.
Exactly.
He may well be some of the problem, but by stating he's the complete problem is very naive.
That's just going back to the same sort of mentality that we've had for 25 years. The problem has to be the senior coach. Put a noose around his neck, get rid of him, and get the next one in. And hopefully things will change. That's got to change, that sort of mentality, I would have thought. Why isn't a review being done on the men's team in the same way that it was done on the men's team, Steve?
Well, I asked that question earlier, Vince. You're exactly right. Well, why wasn't it done even sooner? I mean, this is just getting in worse and worse and worse each year now. Great question. I mean, I think that's one we can probably pose.
Maybe that's a question that we can ask at the annual general meeting on Tuesday night. Why is it that the women's team wasn't reviewed and the football department, if it's a complete football department review, why isn't that reviewing the women's side of things as well? I mean, is there a separate football department for the women's as there is for men's? Or is it all within what we call the Carlton Football Department?
The program is separate. The actual football program itself is separate. However, you would think that the way a department runs is in direct reports would report up to Lloyd, or you would think. And then obviously the CEO after that. If those reporting lines all report up, well, you can't. You'd be lucky if you had a really good football program on one side and a really poor one on the other. Where there's smoke, there's fire. There may well be issues in both ones.
Well, isn't it funny how Carlton Football Club have not seen fit to put up their board member who's going up for re-election? And by the way, the voting's already finished on Friday, I believe. You had to get your votes in by Friday night. So we'll find out the results of that election on Tuesday at the annual general meeting. But the board member responsible for the AFLW program is Paddy Kinnersley, and she's one of the 3 board members going up for re-election. Not once has the club, put her forward to explain to the Carlton members and Carlton fans what's going on with our women's program, why we're going backwards, what things are in place to try and improve the women's prospects. None of that's happened. Why not? And yet we're expected to re-elect.
Well, I think you also need to explain
based on what information.
Also, I think you needs to explain all the departures and the turnover of staff as well within that department. So there's
when you say departures,
a couple of things, right? If you talk about that, which links to people and culture,
you're referring to those women players who have departed
and coaches, and coaches and administrators as well. Yep, that's right. So it's not just players. We've had a huge turnover in coaches and administrators as well.
Yeah,
which is a major issue. How can the stability be there? How many times have we had emails? And I'm placed on the spot now to answer to mention names and times, but we certainly have at the end of each year where football program manager has left, or we've had unstable, which raises nonetheless. But so I think, why hasn't she been asked about it? I think
I think you're getting a bit glitchy. There,
savvy enough.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Most people aren't.
So continue on.
You can hear me now? Yeah. Most people are not savvy enough, they would think, to ask these questions. Most people would just think, oh, well, the coach is bad, sack the coach. But, of course, it's deeper than that. So I think that's the reason. Also, I think some of the spotlight has been taken off the football department because of the social programs that she's also been involved in running. So I think the focus has been sort of
respects.
Yeah, absolutely. So the focus has been more decoyed onto those programs opposed to maybe the actual core business of the team itself. So when they talk about this board member's performance, the portfolio of actually the women's football in itself is not mentioned.
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah.
They're talking about just the programs that she's.
Yeah. Yeah, you're still coming on and off out of that internet. I don't know what your Wi-Fi is like there, Steve. I'm getting a little bit of glitchiness coming through from what you're saying, and even the vision coming through is a bit staggered. But anyway, maybe you can try and improve that while we talk.
Okay.
Joe, I think that there's some pretty good points made there. Often the real issues and the real deep-seated cultural problems are masked over a lot. And as usual, It's the coach, the senior coach, more than anyone else that gets the knife in the back when things don't quite work. But that's not always the root cause of the problem.
No, we'll have a look at Melbourne. I mean, they won a premiership last year, and they had that.
And at the start of the year, they were saying that Simon Goodwin might not last.
Yeah, and then a couple of weeks ago, I read that he was having beers with the players, and the doctor wanted him kicked out for bullying. I mean, to be honest, we're mushrooms. We don't get told a lot of the things, and we don't see it. And to be honest, right. As a supporter, I don't really care about those things. I just want wins. I want a victory, right? And this is what got me, when you guys were talking about the Constitution. And the first thing that should be in your Constitution is about winning football games or winning premierships. But no, we've got all these other things that mask over. It's like just putting Band-Aids over everything and expecting it to work. And, sometimes you got to take the hard decisions. You got to sack the wrong people. You got to buy a bullet to person, train player, do this, do that. Well,
geez, I'm not having a lot of luck with you guys tonight. It looks like Joe's internet's starting to go now.
We're just about to get a storm here.
Oh,
so that's why I was trying to move before.
One of those Thailand typhoons.
Yeah. But too often we just want to sack one person, and that person, unfortunately, always seems to be the coach, head coach. And I think all football clubs are the same, to be honest.
Well,
right?
it's probably that way because there's a lot of people who should be held a lot more accountable in their positions on boards of directors. Who try to deflect the blame away from them and the program that they're meant to be responsible for, and they just look for scapegoats. And the easiest scapegoat of all is the coach. The players aren't playing well enough to win the games, so it must be as simple as the coach is the problem, and we just got to get another one.
But Vince, it's sold. It is sold though. They're so smart in the way they do it. They sell it to say, "Look what we've done. We've done a fantastic thing. We've sacked the coach." Yeah. Isn't it great? Let's have a ceremony about it,
and everyone
to talk about how we've sacked the coach. And then they flip the narrative around to say what a great job they've done because they've knifed the coach, rather than actually going, hang on, why did it get to the point in the first place that we had to knife the coach? That we shouldn't have had to knife, and we shouldn't have had to knife. But we knifed because we didn't even look at the whole portfolio in its entirety. That is really smart marketing.
What makes me shake my head in disbelief is when I see people roundly applauding the club and its board for sacking David Teague, for example, because clearly he was the problem. and clearly he needed to go, and clearly the players weren't playing for him, and clearly the game plan was flawed, and our defence was all over the place, and we were letting all of these consecutive goals go through and all of this stuff. But this is the same person that board trotted out 2 years earlier and said, this is the guy that's the best person that we can identify and interview. He ticks all the boxes. He couldn't be more ready to coach. And they make all of these sorts of statements. Does anyone think back to that and hold the board accountable for having sold us this so-called dud coach?
Can't
Does
do
anyone
that.
say, hang on, you're now wanting to sack the guy that you actually wholeheartedly endorsed, and you said that you went through this program of due diligence to make sure that we got the best person for the job. Now they're saying that they've done exactly the same thing with Michael Voss, and I guarantee you that if in 2 or 3 years' time he hasn't got us into the finals, guess what?
He's gone.
They'll sack him too. And again, the supporters will say, oh, they've done the right thing. They've sacked him. He was no good. He was terrible.
He wasn't the right. But I don't know if we're having
It just makes you shake your head as to how gullible some supporters
but it's
be.
the way. No, they are gullible, Vince. But the club are genius the way they spin this. The way they spin this, they start gradually turning.
I'll take my hat off to the club.
Yeah, but Steve, it's not just Carlton.
They start gradually. No. But this is PR departments, Joe.
I know.
Listen, forget Carlton. These are very, very smart PR departments that are working in marketing or other types of advertising, crisis management, they call it, right? Major corporates use them in crisis management or in situations where they need to spin a narrative to sell a story. What they do, they go, right, okay, so you're going to get rid of this coach at the end of the year, are you? Okay, round 10, beauty. Let's start not publicly coming out and supporting them anymore. Number one, let's start fear-mongering a bit out there. Number two, let's not talk about the contract until the end of the year. Number three, all of those gradual things happen, and then the subliminal messages, and then the supporters get used to the idea. You know what? This coach is no good. You know what? He's going to be sacked. Then when that day comes,
it's called
board
conditioning.
Of management, absolutely. Yeah. It's genius. It's very smart.
But as Vince said last year, the moment that the Gooch come out and said David Teague has the full support of the board, Vince said he's gone. As soon as you hear those dreaded words, right, he should have started looking for a new job then.
I don't know that it was the president. I think it might have been the CEO, Kane Little, when they were up there in Sydney and they just lost the West Coast. And I think he said, no, David Teague has the full support of the club.
Pity Kane Little didn't have it either.
No, well, in the end, he didn't have it either. Oh, dear.
But
we love a good sacking, don't we, at Carlton?
They're great spin doctors.
Steve and Joe, why don't we discuss this annual general meeting, which is taking place this Tuesday evening, starting at 6:30. It is purely an online meeting. No one can actually gather at a place. By the way, just to update everybody, the Victorian government has now removed all restrictions on crowds. You can put 100,000 people at round one. Right?
But no one at the
Carlton
AGM.
Richmond game. But the Carlton Football Club, no, way too dangerous with COVID to put probably 100 people into a room.
No. There's also the spin. The other bit of spin is the development. Yeah. That's another issue. We've got construction workers everywhere, construction going on left, right, and centre.
But you don't have to have it at the club, Steve. We've had many annual general meeting at Moonee Valley Racecourse, at the MCG, and all sorts of other places that in the past. Why can't we do that again? There is no reason why we can't have an annual general meeting where people can actually gather, as we've always done and traditionally done. And for some reason, they have decided to make it purely online. And it concerns me that they might jump on this and try to make it an ongoing I guess, an ongoing way of doing an AGM, whether there's COVID around or no COVID around.
Yeah, it's a worry for me.
I really.
And you know where this started, Vince? You know where this started?
What's behind all this? Yeah.
This started before COVID, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you exactly the reason. We had a members forum in 2018, I think it was at that time. There were so many hot questions asked of the president then, Mark LaGiudice, that the following year they decided to do the whole members forum online. That was the first time. Now, they didn't have a mix or a blend of online and in person. The whole thing was online. And that was also a decoy tactic so that they didn't have to answer all questions, and questions were themed. So you'd be football in a football bucket, in a finance bucket, in a whatever. They divided all the questions up into themes, and they chose selected ones that represented the cross-section of the theme of the questions, and it was online. And even all the members were very upset. Now, I don't know if you remember that. It was probably 3-4 years ago now. It started then. That was the lack of accountability. It was a masterstroke, absolute masterstroke by them to essentially not have a room and not have questions asked of them.
But doesn't it just go to show you and show all Carlton members that you've got a board that's doing everything in its power to avoid the hard questions, to avoid having to be transparent, to avoid having to be accountable, and we'll try any tactic to make it harder and harder and harder for people to get their questions asked in the first place, and then to actually provide them with a decent, honest, and transparent answer.
Smart.
This is where it's designed to almost quash any member
involvement,
interest and involvement in what's going on in an annual general meeting.
Yeah,
make it as
the beauty of the pub,
vague as possible, so that people don't even bother tuning in. Sorry,
Steve, I think Steve's
go ahead,
frozen.
Steve.
A member can ask a question. Yeah. The beauty of the public questions is that a member can ask a question, other members can hear the questions and also hear the response. Now that provokes thought, and that essentially gets members talking about issues and matters and debates and possible ways to solve a problem or have a strategy to move forward as a club.
Yeah.
That is the reason they are so important, these in-person meetings or meetings that have involvement. The club want to segregate each member based to the level 2 captains club, the AFL member people over there, the Carltonians over there, divide and conquer. The captains club, ground level people down there.
Yeah, because if you put everyone
That's
in
right.
a big room at Moonee Valley, and one person asks an absolute doozy of a question that the president or some other board member can't answer, everyone starts to cotton on that maybe they're not being honest, or maybe they're not being transparent, or what have you. So you're right. If they can segregate everyone into little groups, all of a sudden the voice of the member, of the average member, is diluted almost into nothing.
Yes. I didn't even receive the report.
Spot on.
Well,
very smart again.
Go on.
The report is
Steve,
you don't get a hard
to us?
copy anymore. There's a link.
Can't hear you,
Sorry,
Steve.
mate. You're getting glitchy again. Can you start again?
Yeah.
Start again.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You don't receive a hard copy. You don't get a hard copy of the report. It's just a link in the AGM.
You used to get it, but you used to get it a few years ago.
But did you get an email to say there's an AGM?
Yes.
I didn't.
If you're a voting member, you would
pay $1,000 a year. I'm a captain's club member.
Well, you should get one.
I didn't get it.
Then you should.
I'm telling you now, there are 12 people in our group, and not one of us received the link.
Well, I can tell you that the meeting was announced about 3 weeks ago, initially. But what we also didn't get until last Thursday night, which is about 24 hours before voting closed, we got an email from the president, didn't we, Steve? Informing us about the election and informing us about how we can click on here to vote and all that sort of thing. But basically, it gave you 24 hours to not only see the email, but to respond to the email and put in your vote before the Friday deadline. I mean, why can't that particular email be sent way before Thursday night? Why not? Why can't it be sent on the Monday night?
It's like a good comedy, Vince. It's all in the timing.
But again, I say to you that I put it to you that this sort of thing is done very deliberately so that they can say, oh, no, we followed the Constitution, but provided as minimal notice as possible, instructed people on how to vote and all that sort of thing, again, with only 24 hours notice before the deadline shuts. As I said, the voting for the 3 seats on the board has already concluded as of Friday night. And, of course, as usual, they are scheduling the annual general meeting to occur in February rather than December. And there's no reason why, in my view, they can't do the AGM in December. It's being done for very strategic reasons so that it minimises the appetite for change. It minimises the appetite for members to complain about last year's performance because they're already getting ready and I guess very expectant and very optimistic about the new season that's about to embark on us. So it's very clever the way they do it, but I don't believe that any annual general meeting should take place for any club beyond the previous year. It should be done prior to Christmas, in my view. Well, and there's no reason why it can't be, because the auditors have proven in the past that a month is more than adequate time for them to audit the books. Correct, Steve?
2 months. I agree. 2 months. 2 months is plenty of time from the closure of that. So by Christmas, definitely every year.
Yeah. So
maybe they should put that in the Constitution.
Well, I think that question ought to be asked. Why are you scheduling these meetings in February when we're about to embark on a new season?
In 30 days.
When you have more than adequate time to schedule it in December.
It's been
is
asked
it not
before.
true? And further to that, is it not true that the reason that you are scheduling these meetings in February is to minimise the appetite for change amongst the voting members? Because they're already forgotten about last year, and last year was last year. We've seen all the changes. Now we're looking forward to a new year. Isn't that for very psychological reasons that you are scheduling the AGM when you are? And I think the very fact, if you ask it like that, will tell a lot of the members what they ought to be thinking about in terms of why the club does what it does.
Well, they're doing it because now we're all hyped up for the new season. You got a new coach. So
therefore, Joe, the chances of Luke Sayers, Greg Williams and Paddy Kinnersley getting re-elected are a lot higher in February the following year than they are if it happens in November or December the previous year.
Because you got players training the house.
Absolutely.
Down. Oh, we're going to be a different team.
Oh, yes, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Steve, why don't we start canvassing some of the hot issues that we believe questions should be asked about at this annual general meeting?
Definitely.
You want to go through some of those?
For sure. Let's go.
Why don't you give us some of the ones that you believe ought to be asked of the club, and specifically whether it be the president or the finance officer or anyone like that.
Okay. So I'll give you a finance one.
Yep.
Has the club turned the profit around so dramatically in such a short period of time? I think I know the answer to it, but I'll ask the question that I know the answer to. with no crowds and limited revenue and so forth. How are they doing that? Well, let me ask the question about the money for the redevelopment.
Yes.
And how that money has been used and how it's been accounted for in the financials.
Yep.
So that money for the redevelopment has been essentially all classified as ordinary revenue.
Yep.
How
can that be possibly regarded as ordinary revenue? That's not the sort of thing that happens in any ordinary year, is it? Receiving government grants to the tune of $15 and $20 million from the state and federal governments is not ordinary revenue. Surely that should be separately categorised as extraordinary revenue rather than ordinary revenue.
Absolutely. So if you want to be transparent, I think you need to put all that grant money into one side and remove it from the books and show it as a separate project. You need to show an expense and liabilities component of that. So essentially everybody knows, okay, the project's 40 million, that's the budget. We've now used 23 million of that 40 million, there's 17 million to go. How are we tracking to budget? And where's that $17 million sitting?
Yep.
It should be sitting separate to the other financials. And then those other financials need to be mentioned because they're ordinary financials. You don't get a $40 million government grant every year, every few years. They're very rare occasions that they occur. So they cannot be thrown into the same bucket as the rest of the money that the club is generating through membership, through merchandise, through sponsorship, etc., etc. That will give the members the true picture. I'll give you my opinion, but I'm only posing the question, right? But this is my opinion from what I've looked into. My opinion that there is in the vicinity of a $5 to $7 million gap between the money that has been spent on the development and the money that has been received by the government, not including the philanthropists. By the club from the government.
That's better. Yeah.
Pardon me. Yep. To fill that $5 million gap, those unnamed philanthropists that don't want to put their name to their donation because they just do it for the pure love and they don't want to be known for their charity. Even though I'm sure there'll be other benefits they will get in kind down the track for their charity, but we won't go there. So there's a $5 to $7 million gap. Where is that $5 to $7 million? I believe that $5 to $7 million is in the club's accounts and is effectively counting for that huge increase in profit and is allowing the club to claim that they are debt free for the first time since, God knows how long. What do you think about that, Vince?
Well, if what you say is true, that we've received $5 to $7 million more than what has been spent on the development, and that, that amount of money, $5 to $7 million, has actually paid for our historical debt to be wiped out so that someone can claim a legacy which says, we've wiped out our historical debt. Aren't we great? Aren't we a great board? We've managed to wipe off the debt that was there for 25 years, but you haven't really wiped it out at all, Steve, because you've used $5 to $7 million of money that's meant to be going to a development to be built, and you've misappropriated that money so that you can look good on over here where you've had $6 million of debt or whatever, so you can say that you've wiped it out, but really you're leaving the same $6 million shortfall in the other account where it's meant to be.
So what happens when
you haven't wiped out $6 million of debt at all?
If you're playing past the parcel, what happens when the music stops? right? What happens when that music stops?
Well, that's all
if you were to, because this is accounting, right? By the people like Supercoach, some people like fantasy football. I like the Carlton accounts, right? Everyone's got their own things they like to follow, right? Each to their own, right? Each to their own, right? But this is more like fantasy football. But anyway, that's another story. So if you actually, to look at this, you've got to get the annual report of 2018, 19, 20, and 21.
Okay.
4 of them. And then you have to go.
Have you done that? Have you got a comparison for us?
I've got spreadsheets.
Okay. So what
so you
does
can
that
see.
show us?
Which shows $29 million. 29. And then it shows 23 million that has been spent on capital property, plant and equipment, they call it, right? For accounting. And I don't want to turn tonight into an accounting session. And I'm not an absolute expert in that, but I'm just looking at I'm just providing my insight and what my study's been on the accounts. So there's a $6 million gap. Now, it's not itemised to say what buildings were spent on that. Could be some of it could be maintenance on current existing buildings. Some of the donations of the 23 million might not be all government. 29 million might not be all government grant money. It might be other donations of other sorts. Although there's $3 million of philanthropy that has been separated. But essentially, as rubbery as I can try and make out of the figures, there's a $5 to $7 million gap. Where I went to school, that doesn't add up.
No. And what it tells me is that in order for someone to be able to say, we've paid off all of our debt, aren't we fantastic? They've used $6 million that should never have been taken out of that account, which relates to the new development, and use that to pay off a whole stack of loans.
Yeah, and they're just going to create new debt.
So therefore, there's a $6 million shortfall.
You know what that's like?
Look, if that bank account that the government grants went into, let's call it the new Icon Park development account, okay? Now, if that's had so far $29 million worth of money put into it, and 23 million of it has been spent on the actual development, and the other 6 has been used to pay off some historical debts and loans so that we wipe those out, so that the club can make an announcement to the public and to the members and to the media, hey, look how great we are. We've paid off all of our historical debt. No, you haven't, because you've still got a $6 million problem back over here in this account, which is meant to be for the government.
Do you know what I relate this to? And let's forget accounting. Remember Campo's salary?
Very shifty and deceptive representation of the facts, if this is true.
Remember Campo's salary? He was on this back-ended contract. When was it? 2004 or something? Oh, anyway, you'd know, Vince, the years that they all just merged into one for me. But Campo had he was on, that was big money. I think he was on 600 and there was maybe 800. I don't know. He was on huge money at the time. And he had the last 2 or 3 years of his contract, he had back-ended after back-ended after back-ended contracts. And so some other players did as well. This is the same. This is like back-ending a player's football contract. Yeah, that's right. It's not different. I'm just giving an analogy so people understand. Yeah.
But as an accountant, I'm telling you what they're doing. All they're doing is paying off historical debt so that then they can go create new debt. So
do you know what the colloquial saying is? They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then it doesn't work. And unfortunately, what everyone in Carlton memberland believes and hears, and the same thing in the media with all of the media journos and columnists and people who talk about Carlton, they're all saying, oh, what a great job they've done. They've wiped off all of their debt. No, they haven't.
Off field, they're flying off the field. They're flying off field.
Technically, what they've done is, they've wiped off $6 million of these old loans that used to be with NAB or ANZ or
Westpac.
the AFL itself was probably owed money.
Yeah.
But that's using money that's meant to be going into something else. And if it wasn't for that new development that's happening, we would never have had access to that money to pay off the historical debt.
Well,
isn't that true?
Why every member needs an explanation of how this development is running from a project management point of view. Is it on time? Is it on budget? How much have we spent? How long before it's finished? And how much more do we need? Simple.
But
then let's talk about the finances separately.
I've got a feeling that they're going to be running around hustling up as much money from philanthropists to make up this $6 million shortfall before too long, because if there is a $6 million shortfall in that account, it's not just going to appear out of thin air. They're going to need to get that deficit put back in.
Are you saying you're going to get a phone call, Vince?
What I'm saying is that they're either going to have to hustle up that money from benefactors and philanthropists that love Carlton and support Carlton, or if they fail to do so, guess what they're going to need to do? Go to the bank and borrow another $6 million.
But that's what they'll do. That's what
they'll have to do.
No, but so then they'll say,
they've got a $5 million Westpac overdraw facility, and that was originally what they owed the $5 million on. But I think the model, I think it's not just the benefactors. I believe they think that if the club turns the corner, we get crowds back at the football, they make the A, win games, growth in membership, blah blah blah.
But again, it's all on the never. But it's all on the never, Steve.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's all based on if we do this and if we achieve that and if we make the finals and if we get more sponsors and if.
They're rolling the dice, baby, and they want bread.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. But again, what we need to do is ask the questions at the annual general meeting.
But honestly, do you think
what we want is an
answer? You won't get the right answer.
The question's been asked 3 years in a row, Joe.
As Steve said, these people are professional spin doctors. They're just going to spin out some yarn, and all the people are going to go, oh, yeah.
Are you trying to suggest, Joe, are you trying to suggest that the Carlton board's not being transparent with its members?
Would never say that. I would.
But the board's changed. But don't forget, half the board's been replaced with new, fresh people. You're casting the aspersions on all of these other people.
Yeah, but these people were put in by the people that were leaving. So
correct.
It's just all we're doing is shuffling the chairs on the Titanic.
But that's not how
the people's of Judea. What was it? What was it? The People's Republic of Judea, or the
People's people?
It's the Popular Front of Judea.
It's not the Judean People's Front. It's the People's Front of Judea.
The People's Judean People's Front. Fuck.
If you're not sure what we're talking about here, everyone that's watching, go and watch The Life of Brian, Monty Python movie back from 1978. I thought we were the Popular Front.
On a serious note, the financial statements are a snapshot, if you like, of at a point in time of the finances, and I think members are owed an honest and open, transparent snapshot of where we sit right now.
Have you read the notes? You've got to read the notes to the accounts. That's where the detail is. A lot of people never read notes. A lot of people don't.
No, but Joe, this is the problem. Joe, the problem is that you're asking, this has already been done. We've read all the notes, and the notes are as mysterious or as
vague,
general as you could possibly have. Vague, yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
Well, after this show, I'm going to get on and have a look myself as a trained accountant.
But Joe, just think about it. Now, people like Steve and I have got a very close eye for detail on, and a good eye for detail on this sort of stuff. The average member,
it won't. They won't.
You know, I'm telling you now, 99% of the members wouldn't even look at it, let alone try and understand it.
No.
The financial accounts and records are done in such a way that the average person says, "Oh, I don't know, I can't make any sense of it." Whatever.
So let me.
They don't really care.
Vince, why is it important and I know the answer you're going to give, but I'll ask the question anyway for the viewers. Why is it important for financial accounts to be really clear to members so that members truly understand the financial position of the club? Most members will think, as long as we don't care how much in debt we are, as long as we win football games. Give me your opinion why this is important.
Well, look, my view as to why it's important is that if you don't truly understand the financial position that the club is in and have it explained to you in a transparent fashion so that they can very simply give you a snapshot picture as to where we're at, you won't have any idea as to whether your board is actually performing. And that's what I think they're trying to achieve. That by letting it be as vague as possible, they're basically saying, oh, trust us, we've got it all under control, even though it could be an absolutely disastrous condition, our financial position. But by not expressing it in those terms, they avoid accountability.
Yeah, but
I believe that the club, if it's truly as transparent as they say that they are, and if Luke Sayers is going to be a new type of president with a more open and transparent way of communicating, he should put out a video, put it on the Carlton website, send it as an email so that everyone can see it and watch it, and explain in very simple layman's terms where we're at with our finances, what profit we made in a trading sense, in a normal trading sense, and where extraordinary revenue like government grants for this development, treat that as a separate project and talk about how much we've received out of the 35 million from the governments and how much of it we've spent and where that money has gone. And if it's been used to pay off the historical debt, even if it's only for a temporary period of time, be honest and tell us, right? Say, we've used $6 million out of that government grant money to pay off all of those loans that we told you we'd been paying off, but we're actually $6 million shortfall now in our government grant account. So we're actually still got a $6 million problem. That's being honest. But they won't do it because they're not interested in telling you the real situation. Because it will reflect poorly on them.
But also that money, also that linking that to football, the position the club is in also shows what potential investment it can have in the football department in future. So if it is in a true positive financial position, not an on paper moving things, shuffling things around financial
Clever
position,
accounting.
but a real, a true cash position, they can then truly go really hard at investing in the football department and spend their money where they need to. That is where it's got to be surely looked at.
Well, I believe
that's really where the member suffers from that.
I believe even something as simple as those grandstands that we had built all those years ago, like the Legend Stand, etc., is being based in our financials, in our balance sheet, at having a value of $10 million or something. Is that right?
Yeah. So just to give everyone an idea,
how do we get a valuation like that?
Assets Carlton. Well, I think it's dropped a bit from 10, but it was at one point it was 14, and they've depreciated it down. But essentially, they see our grandstands and our playing surface. They spent $2 million on resurfacing the ground about 4 years ago. They call that an asset, not an expense, but an asset, because they say that now Carlton doesn't play any games there anymore. Well, a few games where people will pay $10 a head to get in for the AFLW maybe or something like that, but no real AFL games. They might rent the ground to certain leagues, but other than that, you're not going to recoup that revenue. So to say the ground is a huge financial asset and you can't sell it, can you? You can't sell the grandstand. You can't sell the playing surface. So it isn't.
No.
You're not making money out of it.
So maybe
So
they're
they've classified
valuing
as
it
an
at that
asset.
because that's what it cost them to build the grandstand, for example. And therefore, because it cost $15 million to build,
It's worth
$15 million in
But
value. And
why
then
they
over
do
the
that
years, they've
too-
depreciated it down to $10 million.
Why they do that too is they've got their assets on one side and their liabilities or debts on the other. And as long as their assets are slightly higher, or that in whether it's a book value, not a real value,
Yeah.
don't worry about the real value is in how many people are paying through the turnstiles to go to games at Carlton anymore, because we know that's not happening. The book value, the fear, exactly. Then suddenly your assets are more than your liabilities, and suddenly you're okay. But that's an on-paper asset. It's not a real asset. Again, you ask these questions at AGMs, and what do you get? Oh, that's we've determined it that way, and that's the reason we've come up with that formula. Blah blah blah. Anyway.
Well, I think that, you know, if it's good enough for Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer of Australia, to come out and explain the national accounts to the average person every year and explain the state of the country's finances, I think it's good enough for the club's financial officer or president or whoever's prepared to come out and explain it to explain our own financial position, because I don't believe at an AGM I've ever heard anyone explain it in layperson's terms. It's all very complicated, and I think that's a very deliberate ploy.
Yeah, and they do that for a reason.
It is.
Because they don't want you to understand.
Any other questions that you can come up with that would be worthy of being asked at the annual general meeting, gentlemen? Either one of you?
When are we going to win games?
Now you're talking like the average supporter that turns up.
But you mentioned before, Steve, about the average supporter doesn't look at the financials. They just want to win games. We can't even do that. So,
but you see what the average supporter wants, which you're quite right, Joe. The average supporter wants to win games of football and make the finals and win premierships. True?
Yep.
Now that is and should be the major focus of the club. But in order to achieve that, you've got to have your affairs in place off the ground.
I know, but people don't understand that.
Yes, I know. Well, a lot of people do understand that. And I believe that the club has a duty, and its board has a duty to explain that off-field position so that we know how healthy or unhealthy we are in being able to achieve the ultimate prizes of winning games and getting in the finals and winning premierships, because that's just not going to happen if our affairs off the field are very poor. We're not going to have the money to pour into the football department. We're not going to have the resources to recruit key staff and quality staff in good positions within our administration. This is how it affects ultimately what we can put out on the field. Isn't it, Steve?
Absolutely. There's a huge link. Absolutely. If you're not stable and you don't have everything right in your own backyard relating to finances and appointments and so forth, all of the rest will not happen. The grand final's been played almost before the season starts, if you know what I mean. You know, in those terms. I've got another one. So there was $700,000 in executive salaries payments made. So that went up this year, $700K more.
So that was the increase.
$700K more.
You said that's what was paid. You mean that's what was paid increase. In addition to previous year? Okay.
Yeah. Me too.
So why did we end up having to spend over $700,000 more this year than last year?
That'll be a question.
Isn't that the question?
Yes, and I'm assuming it's payouts of certain staff.
I would say that too.
Now, $700K, at a club level, when we're just bordering on profitable, who's got a lazy $700K lying around to pay off staffs because you've made a mistake in hiring them, essentially, if they were no good.
David Teague, for starters, was sacked with another year to go on his contract.
Yep,
there's your first
right.
500,000. You would have thought roughly 500.
Kane Little.
Kane Little might have had a couple of hundred to be paid out. There's your 700.
Yeah.
So these are some questions that can be asked around that as well. So So they're the main.
Now, can I hang on before we move off that?
Yeah.
If the answer to that is, oh look, we can't tell you who we paid that money to or how much money was given to this person or that person for, contractual reasons, confidentiality clauses in contracts. Is that an acceptable response? Is that something that we as members should accept? Or should we say, no, that's not acceptable, we demand to know?
I think the breakdown isn't necessarily required, but the people who were involved that they paid out, you would probably want at least the names, right? So I wouldn't expect to know how much Kane Little got paid out, but I would want to know the bundle of money that his payout came from and all the other people they sacked along the way, right?
Yeah, but you're not gonna get told that. No, they won't. They won't tell you.
Should they? Should they, Joe?
Possibly they should name the executives, but I mean we don't know what's written in the contract, right? So if they do have these confidentiality clauses, well, the last thing that we want is the individual then coming back and suing the club saying, well, you broke the confidentiality clause. But I doubt very much whether they would have that confidentiality clause in their contract. It'd be a standard contract. Maybe David Teague might have it, but I doubt if Kane Little or any other executive had it.
By the way, gents, did we have a comment up before? Did one of you put up someone's comment that we should read out? I can't. I remember seeing something come up.
Lana said, just pay the balance, please.
What's that?
Lana,
do you want to put that one up again, Steve?
Yeah.
Just pay the balance, please, Jeannie. Well, see, again, I've got to say, as much as I think Lana was just being humorous, this attitude of, oh, don't worry about it, the Pratt family will fix it up, or don't worry, Bruce Matheson will pay the shortfall here or there. I honestly think we've got to move away from this reliance.
This is dangerous.
And it's coming from supporters. It doesn't even have to come from the board anymore. It's the supporters asking for these families to get involved and pay off debts and what have you. It puts us in a position as a club where we become more and more reliant and dependent on these people for our very survival. And
yes,
that's what we've got to move away from, because
but Vince,
comes at a massive cost.
What do the Pratts and the Mathesons and whatever benefactors want for their money? Are they just giving it out of the kindness of their heart?
No, nothing comes for nothing.
Or do they want control or input or some form of levers?
Is look at the nature of the board and the people who are on the board. And I can't remember whether I used this analogy on one of our shows recently. I think I might have, but I liken it to being a chessboard or a game of chess, and the benefactors at Carlton and the people that really control the board at Carlton, most of them don't actually have a seat on the board at Carlton. They are actually the big pieces at the back, the king, the queen, the bishop, the knight and the rook, and they represent the 5 families. And all they do is that they keep replacing the pawns at the front. And those 8 pawns at the front are the 8 members that you'll see on the board. And if they've got to replace 4 people, like they did back in August, with another 4 people to make it look like we've got half a new board, that's what they'll do. But those families, the only difference is that instead of, for example, Mark Lejudice representing one of them, now they've got someone else representing one of them. So, whether that's Tim Lincoln or Lara Carey or, Rob Priestley, that's, all they do is that they change the pawns at the front that are representing the families that are actually the puppet masters at the back that are deciding to make the moves and change the pieces as they see fit. Is that a fairly good analogy of how the Carlton board works?
Yeah.
And so that's people are saying, we've got big change at Carlton. We've replaced half of the members on the board.
Vince, but that's like politics as well. You've got factions within Labor and Liberal Party, and they roll out their person that they want. But they're pulling the strings in the back room, aren't they?
But really, it's the union bosses at the CFMEU or at, the AWU or whatever. They're the ones that are really controlling things, but they put their little member of parliament in and they represent their interests. And it's very, very similar. Very good analogy that you've just used there.
Yeah, it is. I just like people to understand.
But how many Carlton supporters are aware of this? Not many.
No.
Go on. Sorry, I was sorry to interrupt you.
What were some other questions? I think we definitely need to ask the president on his 9 years on the board and why things will be different. What did he do for 9 years while he was on the board? Because essentially that 9 years that he was on the board was a failed decade, wasn't it?
It was.
So what was his role within that 9 and why will it be different this time?
Well, I think he was asked this question once. I saw a show that where he was interviewed, and what he said at the time was that you're referring to Luke Sayers, obviously the new president. Yes. What he said at the time is that his major area of responsibility was financial. His background is in accounting firms like PwC, for example, and therefore it was the financial side of the club that his focus was on. And that was his swim lane. I think he used to describe it as that was his swim lane. You just stick to your swim lane when you're a board member. You've got a certain skill set. You just stick to that area of responsibility that you're meant to be accountable for. But now that he's president, now he has to be across all of the swim lanes and effectively have a broader involvement and a broader focus on all facets of the club, including the on-field and including all the other swim lanes, if you like, that the other 7 board members are now responsible for.
That was a race.
In fairness to Luke Sayers, I think that's a reasonable explanation. But what it doesn't answer is why did you go along with all of the board's decisions at the time when it came to, for example, sacking Mick Malthouse and replacing him with Brendan Bolton, or sacking Brendan Bolton and replacing him with David Teague, et cetera, et cetera. Why did you go along with all of these decisions?
I would say the swim lane of finance, though, Vince, wasn't successful.
Exactly.
I would not.
Well, you see,
he
would, because we've paid off our historical debt.
Here we go again.
Even though we've created just as big a debt over here in a different account.
Make him the president. Oh, he already is.
Very, very clever accounting, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But representations can be made like this, and people just swallow it and say, "Oh, well, how good are you? Your area of expertise was finance, and look, we've paid off all of our historical debt. Well done. It's a credit to you. No wonder they made you president."
Wasn't me. Problems over there.
No, not me. It's you. Yeah. This one.
So I've got one from Lana here.
Yes.
Aren't we the members supposed to own the club? Who owns the Carlton Football Club?
Good question, Lana. Very good question.
AFL. It's a great question. Theoretically, we do, but we get told nothing. And the more questions we ask, but it's true, the more questions we ask, they sort of basically tell us, shut up and sit in the corner. I mean, these questions that we're asking, we should be able to get answers. Well, I'll guarantee you won't get it.
Joe, it's very paternalistic. They think they know best. They think they know what's right. And they almost patronise you to say, no, we know more than you.
Exactly. How dare you question us, Joe?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Just get back in your box and stop asking stupid questions. Trust us. We know what we're doing. We know what's best for the club.
Yeah, because I played at the club.
If you've got any brains, you'll just sit back and enjoy the ride, like you have for the last 25 years of mediocrity.
I'm enjoying mediocrity. I thrive on mediocrity. Who wants to be successful? That's
the reality is, to answer your question, Lana, yes, the members are technically the owners of the club, and we are still a member-based organisation, thank goodness. And yes, we do still have some democratic rights, and yes, we do have some voting rights. And, we are entitled to attend an annual general meeting, even though now it's going to be online. And we are entitled to ask questions, not that we're guaranteed to have them actually asked of the board members. And yes, we're entitled to expect answers, but that doesn't necessarily mean we'll get the answers. So we're entitled to lots of things, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get them. And if you're unsatisfied with the responses that we get from the board, you have a democratic right to try and create an an EGM, an extraordinary general meeting. You can go out and get a petition, get it signed by 100 voting members, and then they'll just simply throw it back at you and say, we don't think it's valid. Go and spend $100,000 in the Supreme Court and force us to go along with it.
I'll tell you what, if I had the money, I would have done that.
Well, there you go. That's what they're forcing the average member to do now if we want to hold the board accountable. So
because they don't feel it's right to have an extraordinary general meeting.
Yes. I was told why we didn't get one, by the way, Steve, even though we had a petition to create one, is because I'm trying to recall the statement within the meeting that I had with Luke Sayers. I didn't feel it was the right time for us to be doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
I felt that the timing was poor and that that's not what the club needed at this particular point in time when we were searching for a new coach and we were searching for a new CEO.
Yeah, all this coming from a president not elected by the members. Fantastic.
No, in fairness, he's elected by the members to go onto the board. Even though how he got onto the board was because he took a casual vacancy, but he's since been re-elected. It's the rest of his board that actually elects him to be president. That's one thing that people have to understand, is that we don't actually choose the president. The elected board members choose who they want to be the president.
And I'm going to correct you there, because he wasn't elected by the rest of the board. Mark Lagudice anointed him as his successor. So, in fact, he wasn't selected by the rest of the board.
Well, no, but the board still has to formally vote that way.
Ratify.
Yeah.
And as if they're going to not ratify that.
Look, Joe, it's all organised in advance. And as I said, the family members who really run the board, they get to choose who they want to take over from Mark Lagudice, not Mark Lagudice.
When they realised Carlton weren't going to play finals for the umpteenth time in June, that's when, and Mark didn't want to have to deal with that fallout.
Yeah.
He stood aside and absolutely. SOS. Yep.
I'm the captain. I'm not going down with the ship.
Well, look, I think we've canvassed enough of the curly questions that ought to be asked, that we feel that members are entitled to have these questions answered. We'll see what happens on Tuesday night. How many of these questions will actually be aired and how many of them will be answered will be interesting, but they will certainly be put forward to the board in advance of Tuesday's meeting so that we can hopefully get some answers to these very pointed questions.
The other thing, Vince, when you are at a meeting live and you get the microphone off one of the Carlton staff members, you tend to turn to one side to protect that microphone. And then when your question is answered, you move away slightly because you don't like the answer, and then you ask a follow-up question to make them try to answer the question in the way it was asked. Whereas online, you can't do that. You ask a question and you get one response, and that is it. No clarification.
Next one. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I'll be interested in?
This should be the very first question asked. Why are we doing this purely online? I think there should be an online factor for country members and interstate members, for example, and even international members like Joe. But why can't the rest of us who are local here in Melbourne gather at a venue? It doesn't have to be at the club. We understand that the whole place is undergoing massive redevelopment. So let's do it at the Moonee Valley Celebrity Room. Let's
think of the money
gather where we can actually all get to see and hear what's going on together.
But they're saving money, Vince, by not hiring a room.
That's not the issue, Joe. An annual general meeting. is something that they should be budgeting for. I mean, the cost of that's, not even a piss in the ocean, to be frank.
Well, they've sacked that many people with that money, but we won't go there. But that is a core expense, right? Yeah. Elections, annual general meetings, they're democratic functions of the club, and they must be factored in as fixed cost, not variable cost.
No, they'd be budgeted at the start of the year.
We also should mention that there was another candidate for those three positions, which both obviously Luke Sayers, Greg Williams and Paddy Kinnersley are all asking to be re-elected to their positions. But Bedri Sainovsky put his hand up, and it'll be interesting to see whether he gets the sufficient votes he needs to unseat one of those three. I doubt it very, very much. I don't think there's been very much promotion undertaken by Bedri. I haven't seen him or heard of him on radio stations or in the newspaper or any real coverage. So I'm not sure whether he really did everything possible to get himself elected. I'm not expecting him to get a very high percentage of the vote, but it'll be interesting to see how many people voted for him.
One thing, I know we're going to move off it. I'd be interested to see how many people actually attend this online meeting.
Yeah,
I
don't think we'll be told that, Joe. The other thing we definitely won't be told, as Steve has pointed out in the past, is with this election, we will only be given percentages of the vote, but we won't be told how many votes were actually made, whether it's 200 votes or 2,000 votes or 20,000 votes.
There's a question for you. There's a question for the meeting.
There's another question. Why aren't we being told the numbers of votes as well as the percentages? I mean, Vince, if you were running the Australian Electoral Commission at this next federal election and you said to the Australian public, we're only going to give you the percentages of what everyone got, not tell you how many votes were counted, people would be up in arms.
Maybe we should get them to run it.
This transparent board doesn't want to tell us how many votes have been counted.
So when Anthony Green presses his electoral map, the interactive map that he's got on the screen, it won't have numbers of votes. It will just have percentages.
Anyway,
unbelievable.
Are we gonna have this on ABC TV on Tuesday night? With hotspot? Oh, Victoria are voting, but look at South Australia.
Yeah. Well, look, for what it's worth, I don't think it's a bold prediction by any stretch, but I think all three board members will be comfortably returned.
Landslide.
Even though people like Paddy Kinnersley should have been put up to explain what's going on with our women's program, and she never was and never has, and probably never will be. But anyway, I dare say that they'll all be returned, and a new constitution will be voted on as well, and that new constitution will comfortably be voted in, because they need a minimum of 75% yes vote. And now that we have decided to endorse this new constitution, because it doesn't have the power grab changes anymore. And that's another email that came out. And to Luke Sayers' credit, he actually named those clauses in the email and identified that the club had received sufficient feedback from the members to say that they weren't happy with those clauses, and therefore they've done away with them in the new constitution. So at least he actually brought them up, even though not once was my name mentioned or the Carlton Now group mentioned as a member advocacy group as to what our involvement in getting that change to happen.
Vince, what did Mark Loggiudice say in August about those changes?
He said, I would be staggered if the Carlton members didn't vote for them and vote yes for all of the...
He's misread the room there, hasn't he?
The Constitution, yeah.
He's misread the room there. See now, Vince, on that, talk about spin. Luke Sayers looks like a genius.
Yeah.
What a great bloke. He's taken this feedback on.
Yeah.
Mark Loggiudice, he's left now. He's the old yesterday's man.
Right.
He's gone. We'll blame the previous administration. That's all right.
Yeah.
And
it's
I'm
a
now
shiny
here
new president with a shiny new administration, well, I don't know about new administration. The Brian Cook's probably hardly shiny and new. He's almost ready for the retirement barn. But in fairness, he's a very good appointment. I've got to say that.
Yeah.
He's got the credentials. But yes, they're being trotted out as a new administration under a brand new president that has listened to the members, and they're more receptive, and they're more, I guess, they're making decisions that are being made in response to member feedback. And so therefore what he's really saying is, I've listened and I'm listening and I'm making decisions based on that sort of feedback. And I've got to give him credit.
He was one of the people
from those changes.
He was one of the people that would have concocted the whole constitutional changes. And if he says he had nothing to do with it, I'd struggle to believe
He actually does say that he had nothing to do with it. And he says he wasn't really across it and wasn't really aware of it.
Wasn't in his swimming lane, was it?
And that it had nothing to do with him at the time that it was trotted out by Mark Legiudice in July. So, you can either choose to believe that, even though there's not one person in this country that would have benefited more from those changes than Luke Sayers himself if those changes had have actually gone ahead. The obvious one was to give a brand new president a minimum of 4 years, even though they might only have 1 or 2 years left in their 12-year term. Because, again, that's been retained now. So he can only serve his 12 years on the board. Whether 1 year, 2 years, 3 years or 4 years or more have been served as president is irrelevant. Once you've got to your 12 years, that's it. You've reached your limit. So there's some of the changes that have now been reinstated. So the new constitution now is being fully endorsed by myself and the Carlton Now group, because these power grabs haven't gone ahead. So I'll give Luke Sayers some credit there that he's at least listened and acted.
Okay.
So there you go. One of the other things that he's been very clever at, I must say, is that he's been prepared to get out there in social media land and, go on to certain podcasts and YouTube shows and what have you, and I guess allow the Carlton members and fans to get to know their president a bit better and talk in colloquial terms about how he feels about the club and where we're going and what we're doing and where we're headed and all that sort of thing. Now, again, you can choose to believe all of that, or you can choose to, have a sceptical attitude towards it. But at least he's doing it. So you can only give the man credit for where credit's due, and is at least been more accessible and more visible and more audible. You're seeing him more. You're hearing him more than you did the previous president.
Wouldn't be hard, though, would it? Wouldn't be hard, though.
Well, that's right. It wouldn't have been that hard. But, nevertheless, he's done it. And that's what every president should do. But because he's doing it after a previous president that never did it, he's being roundly applauded like he's doing something special. But he's not. He's just doing what a president should do. Anyway, let's move on. We've spent an hour and a half on Carlton and the Carlton Football Club.
Well, just on that, the season's not far away, is it? It's only like 30 days, isn't it?
No. What do you mean 30 days? Our first game's on the 17th of March. It's only
29 days.
Sorry?
It's about 29 or 28 days.
No, it's on a Thursday night, and we're broadcasting on a Sunday, so I think you'll find it's more like
3.5 weeks.
days.
3.5 weeks away.
I read something today. It was 28 days or something.
Weeks from
it's less than 4 weeks, Joe. It's less than 4 weeks.
Okay, fair enough.
In fact, this coming Thursday it'll be 3 weeks to go. So,
but we're not the first game, are we? Isn't there the grand final?
No, we're not. No, it'll be the grand final rematch between Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs, which it should be. I think that's a great that's tradition, and it should be reinstated. Doesn't matter who plays who.
Well, I guess
my view.
I guess closer to the weeks, we'll know a bit more about who's playing and who's not in. I mean, Walsh is out for about 4 weeks, isn't he? He missed the first 4 weeks.
Well, there again, I mentioned that I was with Brendan Favola last night. I was hosting a function where he was the special guest. I asked him his opinion of Sam Walsh's injury, and he said 4 to 8 weeks, you've got to be kidding. That's at least 3 or 4 months, and he probably won't be the same for the entire year after coming off a syndesmosis injury. So I said, well, okay, we'll have to wait and see, I guess. But the skeptical person in me says the club needs to sell memberships and sponsorships, and if they come out and say, guess what, Sam Walsh will probably miss most of the year, what are their chances of selling memberships and sponsorships then, Joe?
Well,
not quite as good, is it? Anyway, I hope, like any Carlton fan, that Walsh's injury is not as severe as first thought, and that he is back after, round 4 or 5. But I can't help but question whether it will be after 4 or 5 rounds. I think it's probably going to be more like half the season gone. But anyway, time will tell.
Yeah,
we can only speculate, and we can only take our club's word for it, and accept that all information that comes out of the club is honest and 100% transparent.
And what would make you think that it's not?
That's right.
We've just spent an hour and a half. You go.
Let's continue on. Steve, anything else you want to mention with Carlton, or can we move on to summing up our other sports for the week?
Yeah, let's do a quick summary of the other sports, shall we?
Hey, before we start that, Steve, you're a bit of a golfer. Someone sent me some video. Did a famous club in America get burnt down the other day?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. In Michigan.
Oak Hills. Is that? Do they know what happened?
Oakland Hills.
Do they know what happened, or?
No, but the clubhouse is it's a timber building. So if you were going to have a fire, that would be the one that would go up straight away. So lots of old memorabilia. They've held US Opens there and Ryder Cups and all sorts of tournaments. So it's really sad.
Yeah. Completely destroyed?
I don't know. I don't know. The insurance people will obviously have to do what they've got. But funny, because it's got 2 courses and it's such a huge club, it's not just the clubhouse. Like there's lots of employees there that will be out of work now as well. You employ a few hundred people at least there, because it's a very wealthy, huge club in the US. So it'll never be the same. Those people maybe have to leave town to get work. Terrible.
That's a pity. Hopefully, if all those trophies have been lost and photos, memorabilia, it's just gut wrenching, isn't it?
Absolutely, irreplaceable.
Yeah. Anyway. Sorry, I just.
No, that's all right. No, good point, Joe. We hope that the buildings are not as badly affected as it appears, but I don't hold that much hope. I think most of it's been destroyed.
Yeah.
The fantastic Riviera Golf Club is host to the tournament that's being played at the moment by most of the world's best players. In fact, every single golfer that's currently in the top 10 is competing at this particular tournament. Steve, and do you want to give us a quick rundown on who's up front and how the Aussies are going? I think a couple of them that were really in strong contention have dropped away a fair bit in the last 9 holes this morning. And of course, there's one round to go, one final round to go tomorrow morning, our time.
Yeah.
You there, mate? Don't tell me you've gone and frozen up on us.
He's done a Vince.
Are you there, Steve?
He's done a Vince.
If you can hear us, move.
No,
he hasn't.
But have you? He's been stuttering all night. Have you had that?
Yeah, I think his Wi-Fi is not working too well at the moment. We might want to take him off and give him a chance to come back on. I can give you a quick rundown, Joe, anyway, because I've got it right here in front of me.
Yeah.
But at the moment, Joachim Niemann from Chile is in front on 19 under par after only 3 rounds. It's a fantastic score.
Must be an easy course.
Oh, no, it's not. It's actually not an easy course at all. But to be 19 under is fantastic. He had the first 2 rounds, 63 and 63. That's 8 under par for each round. And then he got a 68 in yesterday's 3rd round, 3 under par. So a total of 19 under par. He's got a 3-shot lead over young Cameron Young.
Where's Cameron from?
He's
America?
from the US,
Yeah.
and he's 16 under. Then a further 3 shots back to Victor Hovland, who's been playing brilliant golf in recent weeks and months. He's from Norway, and he's on 13 under par at the moment. So he's 6 shots behind the leader. And Justin Thomas is on 12 under, and he's in outright 4th position. And Colin Morikawa, the number 2 player in the world at the moment, he's in 5th position on 11 under. So, and then there's another 4 players on 10 under, including Australia's Mark Leishman, who's also there on 10 under in a tie for 6th. You wouldn't think that anyone outside of that would have a snowflake's chance in hell of winning when you've got the leader at 19 under, and even those guys on 10 under are a massive 9 shots behind. I think realistically, the only winners would probably be within the first 4 players.
Yeah.
Being Neiman, Young, Hovland, or Justin Thomas.
Imagine being 10 under and you're in 6th place. You'd be thinking, what the hell?
Well, Mark Leishman is on 10 under, as I said. Now, 1 shot behind him, and at one stage he was in outright 3rd position before he dropped about 4 shots on the back 9 yesterday. Adam Scott.
Yeah.
He was up as high as 13 under par in outright 3rd this morning when he was halfway through his 3rd round. And unfortunately for Adam, after I think birdieing the 10th, then went and dropped 4 shots in the following 8 holes. So he dropped back from 13 under, outright 3rd, back to 9 under, and now, of course, he's in a tie for 10th in at 9 under par. So realistically, he's 10 shots behind the leader. I can't see him making up that ground. Apart from Leishman on 10 under and Scott on 9 under, we also have other Australians, Matt Jones on 5 under, Cameron Smith, who actually was on 7 under at the start of the 3rd round, but dropped 3 shots yesterday in a 3-over round to finish at 4 under. That was probably his most disappointing round for a long, long time, Cameron Smith. Hopefully he can make up that ground again in the final round. And finally, Cameron Davis on 1 under. So he's a whopping 18 shots behind the leader. No chance at all. So the Aussies have done well. They've all made the cut. And thankfully,
he's back.
They're all playing great golf. And look, I realistically think that the winner's going to come from the top 4. Sorry, Steve, I had to steal your thunder in the end there because we lost you. But hopefully you're back with a decent internet connection.
Yeah, I think some more letters need to be written to the communications minister, but that's another story. I was just talking about Riviera and how great a course and how famous a course it is too. Definitely a tournament worth watching.
Adam Scott's won there before. He loves the course. He says it's his favourite course on the PGA Tour because it reminds him so much of what sort of courses he's used to playing back in Australia with the big eucalypt trees and a lot of the holes and the way they're designed. It's not hard to see why he does so well at Riviera pretty much every year. But he won it in 2020, I think he was the winner, just before COVID hit. But unfortunately, he was in outright 3rd. I was telling Joe he was in outright 3rd at 13 under after birdieing the 10th this morning. And then he dropped 4 shots in the last 8 holes and dropped down to a tie for 10th on only 9 under. And now he's a whopping 10 shots behind the leader. I don't think he can win now.
No, he can't. The rough is pretty thick there, though, and if you get off the course, it does look easy. But if you do get off the fairways, you can have a bit of trouble. It's a just on a side note, it is a fabulous. It's a fabulous representation of the wealth in the Los Angeles area.
Yes.
It is one of the most exclusive clubs in LA.
Pacific Palisades
and it's just beautiful.
Just outside of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Just a bit of cash.
Oh, look, we've been treated this year to some of the most pristine courses in America, seriously. Yeah. Especially those ones in California, like Pebble Beach.
Beach, yeah.
Torrey Pines
Torrey
down
Pines.
in San Diego.
Yep.
And now this one at Riviera, just outside of Los Angeles. They've been absolutely divine courses to look at, as well as, of course, those first couple of tournaments in the year in Hawaii, where, you just won't see more spectacular views than that. But
very different to the courses on the East Coast.
Anyone who loves looking at scenery, even if you just follow golf to look at the scenery, it's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. They look very different on the West Coast to the courses on the East Coast. The East Coast are more the Florida swampland courses, or there's sort of parkland golf courses that you'll get heading to New York and so forth. Different in their own way, but definitely love the West Coast courses for mine. Yeah,
I love the West Coast courses, I must say. The other course I think we should also mention was last week's, and we should briefly talk about that, the Phoenix Open. We were, I think, one round away from determining a winner when we went to air this time last week. So, you want to tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah, Scotty Scheffler finished up winning that tournament.
First ever win, wasn't it?
Yep, it was a breakthrough for him, and a really strong final round. And he had some good players there to contend as well, including former world number one Brooks Koepka. And numerous others. So great performance from him. It's just amazing.
Isn't it interesting how some players who are right up in the top 10 of one tournament then go to the next week's tournament, like Brooks Koepka, who's won, countless, or not countless, but he's won quite a few major tournaments. And the very next week he plays Riviera and he doesn't even make the cut.
Yeah.
I think he finished with 3 over and missed the cut. I think the cut was at even. I think it was at even par, and he missed it by 3 shots. So it's incredible how they can be hot 1 minute and miss the cut the next.
You don't get rewarded for consistency in tournament golf. It's a bit of a myth, Vince, that you actually want to be the sort of player that might miss a lot of cuts, but then actually potentially when he or she is up there, wins a tournament. Or is in that top 3.
Because if you win the tournament, you get those massive amounts of points, like the 500 FedEx Cup points for winning this week, for example. So even if you miss 6 cuts in 6 tournaments, if you go and win 6 tournaments to counteract that, you're probably up in the top 5 in the world, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yes, it's interesting. All right, well, let's wish Mark Leishman, who's surprisingly the leading Aussie after 3 rounds at 10 under. He's been very consistent with rounds of 70, 66 and 67 at 10 under. Adam Scott, hopefully he can recover from his 4-shot swing, I suppose you'd call it, in the second half of the 3rd round. He's on 9 under. Matt Jones on 5 under. Cam Smith also dropped 3 shots yesterday to go from 7 under to 4 under. Cameron Davis has been very consistent at 71, 71 and 70. So basically a par 71, and then a 1 under 70 yesterday.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so who's your tip, just quickly? Do you think Neiman will get across the line at 19 under at the moment? Or will Cameron Young overhaul him? Or can you even see a Victor Hovland coming back from 6 shots behind to snatch it?
No, I think Neiman will win. I've seen what he's been doing in the first 3 rounds, and I think it'll be him. But easy for me to say, well, let's wait and see. If it's not going to be now, it's all set up for him. It is all set up for him with the players around him.
I worry about a guy who's been a front runner for 3 rounds and up the top of the leaderboard as to whether he can do it from what do they call it? From coast to coast, or
yeah.
What
wire
there's
to
a
wire.
saying for it?
Wire to
from
wire.
wire to wire. From wire to wire. Yeah. I think he deserves it, but I wouldn't mind betting that this Cameron Young might haul him in. He's been very good. 66, 62. He shot a 9 under 62 in the second round, and he got a 69 yesterday. So only 3 shots behind. That can be dissipated very, very quickly in golf.
No, it can. You're right. I just like the way Neiman's playing, but it'll be his test. Everyone
and
gets
Victor Hovland's
jittery
been on fire in the first couple of months of this year. And
yes.
even from 6 shots behind, he might do a Nick Faldo as to what he did to Greg Norman all those years ago, come from 6 shots behind in the US Masters and overhaul Greg Norman. I still have nightmares about that.
So does Greg.
Well, very good, Joe. That's exactly right.
Joe,
So does
brought
Greg.
up.
I bet you no one has more nightmares about it than Greg.
Joe, it gets brought up all the time. Don't worry. He's reminded of it many times. When
I'm sure he's sick of it.
Let's continue on, gentlemen. Cricket, we saw the Australians pretty much have a clean sweep over Sri Lanka, didn't they?
Yeah, just
the
sent the fast bowlers home. They're so comfortable with the way they're going.
Yeah. The closest the Sri Lankans got, funnily enough, I think we discussed this last week where we said, the Australians made 160 something or rather over their 20 overs. You know, they should win comfortably over Sri Lanka. No, they didn't. In fact, the Sri Lankans probably could have and should have won. They ended up equaling the same score and they went to a super over. But Josh Hazlewood bowled a fantastic super over. Only 5 runs were scored off of it. And the Australians comfortably, I think they ended up scoring 9 off their super over and comfortably won in the end on the super over. But really, the game was in the balance there at one stage. And the Sri Lankans were a bit stiff not to actually win after 20 overs, I thought.
Do you actually? I actually think people are starting to get sick of this 2020 cricket.
Why is that?
Well, the crowds don't go. I mean, just have a look at that big bash. I don't know. I think.
Do you think that they don't perceive the same level of competition because Sri Lanka's not up to our level?
Yeah, probably. But
that's why I think that they don't get crowds because there's a mismatch. There's a mismatch in ability between these two countries.
I guess so. Maybe we got spoilt from being so dominant in a Test series against
Well, I think
England.
We're probably all cricketed out too. Like we've just finished a massive series of BBL. I mean, there was a game on nearly every single day for the last 2 months of BBL.
Yeah.
I think that we're probably a little bit over it, and to then have a T20 series against a country like Sri Lanka, I don't think it whet anyone's appetite, really. Don't you think, Steve?
No, it's wrong time.
It was a strange scheduling of a T20 series against a country like that.
Did you see that?
Not played in other cities as well.
Yeah.
So it was essentially predominantly, I don't think
bad timing, bad opposition. Did you happen to see that video of Marnus Labuschagne, what he's set up at his house with that rubber mat? And
no, I didn't. Sorry, no. Tell us about it.
I'll send it to you. But he's got like a hallway in his house, and to practice against spin, he's bought this 22-yard rubber mat, and he's put all these metal objects on it so that it emulates the spin of the subcontinent. And he gets his wife to bowl balls down at him, and he's trying to practice. It just shows the level of professionalism this guy is going to. I'll send it to you both. It's amazing. It was on ABC TV.
It's starting to sound like the modern day version of when
Donald
Bradman used the cricket stump up against the golf ball.
But,
it's using amazing. A golf ball on the cricket stump to try and improve his accuracy of.
What we do. What we do in golf, Vince. We cut the club face. We trim the edge off the club face, so essentially it's smaller.
Yes.
And you actually train yourself to hit that smaller center. It trains your hand and your eye coordination, your feel for and awareness.
So that's far more accurate.
That's all sports do that, and it's great. It just goes to show if you can train that way, it becomes a lot easier when you've got everything at your disposal.
So you mean that if I put a typical golf ball down on my tee and I use one of those drivers that have got a head on it the size of a watermelon and I hit the golf ball with that watermelon, you mean I'm not necessarily a very good driver of the ball? Some of those drivers are huge. They are massive. You couldn't possibly miss the ball.
No, you can't. But you've still got to hit the ball properly, Vince, for it to fly. You don't miss the ball, but it'll still roll off the tee. Yeah.
It's a bit like the difference between using water skis and using a ski board. One of those ones that actually you put your feet up on a board that your feet can't miss, can they?
Hey, so
No.
let's move off cricket because I think we've had enough. I'm not a big basketball fan, but apparently that Josh Giddey's just going from strength to strength, which is really good. Young man, he's doing exceptional things over there in the States. Good on him.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's great to see.
Yeah.
And by the way, we should also mention the Super Bowl.
Oh,
yeah.
What a good game. Good game.
What
Wasn't
did
a
you
great
think, Joe?
game, but it was a good
The
game.
LA Rams beating
The Bengals?
the Bengals, yes. The Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, it wasn't a great game, but it was close and it was a good game. Well, we were lucky because all of the playoff series were quite close. I mean, a lot of them went into overtime and won by field goals. So, yes.
I mean, halftime entertainment was pretty good too.
Well, it was no meatloaf. God
rest his soul.
God rest his soul. But, I mean, they're spoilt for talent. I mean, they've got the best entertainers in the world. I mean, 50 Cent was just happened to be in the crowd and, look, I'll come and sing. Here in Australia, we got to go find Barry Crocker or, I don't know, the Seekers or something.
Steve, do you think there's a little bit of money involved in the telecast of the Super Bowl?
Just a little bit.
It was $24.
What's a 30-second ad? What's a 30-second ad worth for the Super Bowl?
Oh, it's millions.
It's
millions. Yeah.
Did you say the cheapest seat at the game was $8,500 US?
Unbelievable.
$24 for a beer.
I can't even afford the beer, let alone the seat. What about if I want to stand?
I bet you Gillan McLaughlin would love to be able to charge that sort of money for an AFL grand final.
Anyway.
Do you reckon members of the home competing clubs got their allocation of tickets?
I think the corporates got their fair share. Don't you think?
Oh, you reckon? You reckon?
8,000. What's the point? Imagine if you go to the football every week, Steve. You, your wife, and your 2 kids. You're up for 40 grand just to go to the football. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Got to take a mortgage out.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Let's move on to the round ball game, Stephen. You're usually on top of all of this sort of thing. Let's go firstly to the local A-League here in Australia. Some matches played recently, and
is there one today?
Melbourne Victory, who've had a couple of unusual losses recently, have gone back to the winners list, I noticed. But do you want to give us a quick rundown of some of the soccer results, both here and I guess all over the main leagues of Europe?
Yeah, sure. So just in the A-League, Melbourne City defeated Newcastle Jets on Friday night 3-0. That was expected. Wellington Phoenix, who have essentially based themselves in New South Wales as due to the issues, obviously, with the
virus
entry into New Zealand.
Yep.
Well, he's gone on us again.
No, we haven't done this again, have we, Steve?
He's done it again. But I'll continue on with him because I've got it up in front of me. So we've got Perth.
Keep going, Joe.
Yeah, Perth Glory beat Brisbane Roar, and Western United beat.
Hang on, give us the score too. 2-0.
Well, 2-0 to Perth Glory.
Yeah.
And Western United 3-2 over Western Sydney Wanderers.
Yes.
Let me get the ladder up. Where is it? The A-League. So on top of the ladder, we have Western United on 22, followed by Melbourne City. Hang on, I'll just remove
Western United's actually on 23, I think you'll find.
Yeah, 23 points.
Yep.
Melbourne City are on 22, Adelaide 18, Sydney FC 18, MacArthur Park 18, and I'll call it MacArthur Park after the song.
And Melbourne Victory just inside the top 6 on 18.
Yeah, which is good.
And there's also a side outside of the top 6 on 18. So there's actually 5 clubs on 18 points, positioned 3rd right through to 7th. Wellington Phoenix is the other team on 18. So you'd think that with a 6-point gap then to Western Sydney Wanderers on only 12, Perth on 11, Central Coast Mariners on 11, and Newcastle Jets on 11, that those sides are going to be hard pressed to make the finals. I think really it's almost down to. I mean, it's only still early, but gee,
yeah. Well,
7 sides looking like head and shoulders above the bottom 4.
Well, Adelaide have played more games than anyone, so at least if you're a Victory supporter, they've got a game in hand. But it's quite interesting. And then if we want to go abroad, interesting game last night that I watched: Tottenham 3, Man City 2.
Yes,
Fantastic.
that was a big win by Tottenham over the top team on the ladder.
Well, it's got all the Liverpool supporters talking again because they've got now. They think that they're going to win tonight. Who do they play tonight?
Well, no, Liverpool beat Norwich 3-1 at home.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
at Anfield.
West Ham, Newcastle 1-1. Arsenal, Brentford. Arsenal 2, Brentford 1. Watford 1-0 over Villa. Burnley 3-0 over Brighton. Chelsea win. Liverpool
1-0 over Crystal Palace. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Liverpool
Everton had another loss. Southampton 2, Everton 0. Geez, my team Everton's really struggling.
You are
even
struggling.
with Frank Lampard, the ex-Chelsea champion, as our new manager.
Well,
we are really struggling. And I dare say, Joe, that if we're not careful, we are in horrible danger of being relegated if things don't turn around.
Well, yeah,
only 4 points above the relegation zone.
Yeah, you got a game in hand, but Burnley have 2.
Doesn't matter how many games in hand you've got. If you're not winning, it's not going to help you.
Yeah,
but anyway, let's forget my team, Everton. They're not even worth talking about. Manchester City still on top on 63. Liverpool with a game in hand is on 57. Chelsea also with a game in hand on Manchester City. They're on 50. And Manchester United is just in the top 4 on 43. So, yeah, I'd say the top 3 are pretty guaranteed to make it into the Champions League. But the 4th position is still in contention, isn't it? Manchester United's on 43, but just outside that is West Ham on 42, Arsenal on 42, and Tottenham on 39 have got some chance still.
Yeah, 2 games in hand, old Arsenal, and they're playing quite well. So,
and so is Tottenham.
Yeah, be interesting there. And I mean, the usual suspects in the other leagues: Serie A, Milan, and Inter. The surprise is probably Juve, who are not having as good a season.
Juventus had a 1-1 draw with Torino. The other games are Sampdoria 2 and Empoli 0. Roma 2 drew with Hellas Verona 2. Salernitana 2 also drew with Milan 2. And there's another game happening tonight between Fiorentina, my favourite team based out of Florence, playing Atalanta at 10:30 tonight. There's also 3 other games happening tomorrow. So if you look at the table there, the 2 Milan clubs, AC Milan and Inter Milan, are up the top of the ladder on 56 and 54 respectively. Napoli in 3rd on 53, and Juventus are just in the top 4 on 47, with Atalanta just outside the top 4 on 44. Lazio and Roma and Fiorentina coming in after that. So, again, the usual suspects up in the top 4. The 2 Milan clubs, Naples and Juventus. They're generally up the top 4 most years.
And in Spain, the big one is Barcelona, who are just not firing at all in 6th
La Liga.
place.
Yes.
You got Real Madrid up top. Anyway.
Well, La Liga results again, the ones worth talking about: Atletico Madrid 3-0 over Osasuna. Real Madrid had a 3-0 win over Alaves. There are games that involve Sevilla and Barcelona also tomorrow. So if you look at the table there, Real Madrid's on 57, followed by Sevilla on 50. Steve's back with us. Good of you to join us again, Steve. Real Betis, the real surprise packet, they're on 43 in 3rd position, and Atletico Madrid's on 42. Barcelona, still struggling to get into that top 4, are in currently 6th position on 39 points. They're not that far away, but as you keep pointing out, Joe, they're not really playing all that well and not well enough to get into the top 4 spots just yet.
No. But
I think my team Sevilla has a big chance to win the La Liga this year.
do you think?
Yep. I do.
You're always on the winners, Vince, except for Everton.
Well, no, my teams are my teams, whether they're winning or not winning in any particular year. But
really?
Everton is struggling. They're in grave danger of being relegated for the first time in their history.
Who's your team in France? PSG?
In League One?
Yeah.
Monaco.
Monaco?
Yes.
They won it a couple of years ago. Oh, no, that's Lille.
No. Monaco did win it about 3 or 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
But then PSG took their best player called Kylian Mbappe, and now he's kicking all the goals for PSG. And one of the main reasons why Paris Saint-Germain are on the top of the ladder.
I see a unnamed Spanish club offered 200 million euros for him, Mbappe, in January, and the bid was rejected.
Yeah, they saved it up, passing around the plate like they do at church. They did a bit of a collection amongst their fans.
No, they went to the Carlton board and asked them to fix their accounts for them.
Well, everyone, I think that pretty much. Well,
Before we go,
leave it there. We've been going for 2 hours, but Joe, it's been great to have you back, mate.
And just on that, I believe there's a walk in the park for Jezza or something. Is that right? For Parkinson's coming up?
Is there?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of it. Maybe you can shed some light for us.
Well, no, I don't know. That's what I've heard.
Well, look, I guess just on that note, the news is that Alex Jesaulenko, the Carlton legend, is not travelling too well health-wise at the moment, suffering from a bit of, not a bit. You don't just suffer from a bit of Parkinson's, but I think it happens to have gotten a hold of him a little. So we wish him all the best, and hopefully, he's on decent medication that can help him through it. So that's sad news. Also, a big shout out and a big hello and all the best to Peter Bazzasto, who's obviously been undertaking a whole series of chemotherapy in recent weeks and months. He's still battling that and still got a few rounds to go, but he's in there fighting like the tiger that he is, and we're all praying and hoping that Peter Bazzasto recovers from that and can hopefully be cancer free after the treatment. I guess a lot of our legends are getting into their 60s and 70s and even into their 80s now. This the following weekend, in fact, our show next Sunday will be on Ron Barassi's 86th, is it? I think it's 86th birthday, if I'm not mistaken. It might be 86 or 87, I can't remember, but it's certainly well past the mid-80s. And he's suffering from dementia and issues like that. So, we're unfortunately, in the next 5 years, probably going to see, a few people no longer with us, and that'll be sad. But we should treasure them while they're still here with us.
Anyway, look, it's been really good to be on. So,
yes, Joe, and you look after yourself. Seeing you contracted COVID, and hopefully, you can recover well enough to get back to work, and also be able to join us here on Blue Sunday in weeks to come.
I will. So I'm going to leave you guys to sign off. So I'll see you soon.
No worries. Good on you, Joe.
Bye.
It was good to have Joe Lutzer with us, our esteemed leader and Grand Poobah, as I call him. Steve, good to have you back with us again, and hopefully we can solve some of these Wi-Fi issues for next week.
Very frustrating.
As usual, it's been a pleasure, and always enjoy having your insights and your opinions and your views on all matters Carlton, and of course sharing with us your perspective on other sports that have been taking place around the world, including golf and cricket and soccer, of course, as we covered them this week. All right, mate. Great to be with you again tonight, and we look forward to being with everyone again next Sunday evening at 8 p.m. In the meantime, go Blues, and see you next week. Cheers.
See ya.